Right. Thanks everyone for joining us. I see we're still assembling here just a little bit, but um, I will start with introductions because we have a lot of people here that are excited to talk about this project and a lot of information to share. And we are recording, so we will be posting this recording. It's being streamed live to YouTube and will be available there. And we'll make sure that it's on our website for the project as well, so that people can watch this at any time that works for them. My name is Jenny Graham. I am the vice chair of the school committee, and it is my excited honor to also be the chair of the Medford Comprehensive High School Building Committee. Um, the committee formed almost a couple of years ago now, with a mission to work in partnership with the Massachusetts School Building Authority to explore the future of Medford High School. So we're going to talk tonight about a whole variety of things, including some of the history of how we have gotten to where we are, as well as some of the things that we're seeing and finding in our exploratory phases. And then we'll wrap up with how you all can be involved in this project. Along the way, there is a Q&A feature in the webinar. If you have questions you'd like us to field, please feel free to pop them in there. If we have time at the end, we will probably field some number of them, but we'll also use those questions as we go forward. To fill out the Q&A section, FAQs on our website, and make sure that we're being responsive to all of those questions as they come up. So thank you all for joining us. We're all really excited for this project, obviously, but also really excited to be moving into this phase. So I'm going to start by introducing some members of the project team. So Matt, if you could go to the next slide. I wanted to give a special shout out to our Medford Connects community engagement team. You will be seeing these folks, so we wanted to give you their picture in coming meetings, and they will be supporting us in some of our live and Zoom input sessions where we'll be collecting feedback to make sure that translation services are available in the languages that Medford speaks. So I just wanted to say welcome. They're here today to gather information and be able to be responsive to questions from the communities that they work with on a regular basis, and just to get ready to be on this journey with us. So thank you all so much for being here. And if you see any of these folks out and about, please thank them for all their good work for Medford. We're going to get started with some introductions. As I mentioned, we'll talk about the process and the schedule. Why are we doing this? I think everyone has an idea of why we are doing this if you're here, but we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll talk about some of the work we're doing in this feasibility study phase around studying our educational needs as well as the physical conditions of the site. Those are two important elements, and we'll talk about why. And then, like I said, we'll wrap up with some talk about how we want to hear from you at various points in this process. And if time allows, we'll answer some questions, and then we will wrap up and post this for everyone to view in future. I will start by introducing the Medford Comprehensive High School Building Committee. The school committee, under its authority, appointed a 25-member committee in April of 2023. So we're coming up on, 2.5 years, actually. Maybe 2024, but we might have a typo there. But what we set out to do was create a committee that is comprised of the right mix of people from across a lot of different specialties, both within our schools, within our city government, across some elected officials, and of community members who have particular skills and talents that we thought would make a well-rounded team. And as we did that, we had 110 applications for this 25-member committee, on top of all of the appointed people who are required by the MSBA, like the mayor and the superintendent and others. This is a list of who our current members are, both voting and non-voting, as well as a nod to some of the folks who have served in various capacities on the committee over the initial stages and have moved on for any number of reasons. But we thank them for their input and their support as well. So we're really, this team has been working really hard to move through the, I'll call it the paperwork phase of this process, and to get on to the things where there's a lot to talk about and a lot of information to share with the community, as well as to hear from the community about the future of this building. So I am going to turn it over on the next slide and introduce our owner's project manager. So through a competitive bidding process, we selected Left Field. They are an owner's project manager, and they do school. That is their specialty and their core, and we're so delighted to have them. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt to introduce his team, and then we'll talk to our architects and our designers.
Great, thank you, Jenny. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in here. Quick introduction of the Left Field team. My name is Matthew Galino. I am one of the project managers and the day-to-day contact, working very closely with the city of Medford and Medford High School. Jennifer Carlson is our project director. Linda Laporto is our director of interiors. She helps a lot behind the scenes, doing a lot of website updates, and really supporting Jen and I in our daily, our day-to-day communications. Adele Sands is our education liaison. She was a superintendent of schools at a CTE school as well. So she is very familiar with this process. She went through a building project of her own when she was in the superintendent's role. So she's been working very closely with the superintendent of Medford. Lynn Stapleton is our project advisor. She's a very experienced OPM in Massachusetts. Is one of the first owner project managers to work with the MSBA back when they were first created in the early 2000s. And then Jay Faxon, I just wanted to highlight him here. He's an MEP expert. He has over 50 years in experience in the field. And I just wanted to kind of highlight this, that Left Field's approach is a very holistic approach. We're not just project managers. We bring a lot of different expertise to the project to really assist the communities that we work in. So with that, I'll hand it over to Matt Rice to introduce the SMMA team.
All right, I think I actually may let Helen start off and then I'll jump in.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Helen Fantini, I'm a project manager with SMMA. And we do have both Matt Rice, principal in charge here this evening, as well as Rosemary Park, educational planner, also an architect. And these are just a few more faces on our team that are very active in these early phases of the project. This team is going to bloom into approaching 100 or so folks once we get into construction documentation. But right now we need to help you figure out what the best approach to a project here in Medford is for this really ready to get going community. So Michael Pardek is our design architect. Mike Parolo is a consultant to us. He's an educational planner and has been leading the visioning outreach and work with the district and the community. Aaron Prostilio, a civil engineer. Kate Took with agency, a landscape architect. Emily Ehlers, HVAC engineer, along with electrical, plumbing engineers. She's sort of our liaison. And then Martine Dion is also supporting our work as our sustainability director. Next.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about process and schedule. I'm going to talk about some of the very early phases of this project, and then I'm going to turn it over to Matt to talk about this feasibility phase that we're in right now. So just by way of a little history, Medford High was built in 1970, and a renovation of our science labs happened in 2015, so that is more than a decade old at this point. Before 2022, Medford had been working in multiple go-arounds to be admitted or accepted or invited to the Massachusetts School Building Authority's program that would allow us to work in partnership with the MSBA to substantially renovate or rebuild Medford High School. Those pre-2022 bids were not successful. And I think as we moved into 2022, we took a different approach to that application. And we really dug deep into a handful of things. One was the educational limitations that the current building provides, as well as some of the ongoing maintenance issues that were increasing in scope and scale as the building ages. So I'm not a building expert myself, but what I'm told is that this is not at all unusual for buildings built in the 1970s to be at this point of, really thinking through the future of the building at this point in time. Back in 2022, we were, because of our sort of renewed approach to submitting our application, we were a finalist to the core program. If you all remember 2022, construction costs went through the roof. Inflation was very, very high. And the MSBA, because of its budget constraints, was only able to let in a fraction of maybe say 60 or 70% of the projects, the core projects like ours, that they normally would in a year. That was also the year where they halted their accelerated repair program that did things like roof replacements, doors and windows. So that budget year was rough, sort of all around. I think I remember it being rough here too, because they all feel a little bit, rough when you're trying to advocate for a lot of money from a finite resource. But I think the MSBA also felt that. So we did not proceed in 2022. So we took all that feedback, and in 2023, we submitted an application again, and that application, we again were a finalist. And then in December of 2023, we were invited to the MSBA's core program. And what that means is we will partner with the MSBA through a process that they have designed, because it works, to build something different here than what we see today. And one of the things that to me is the hallmark of the MSBA's process, to me, there's two big things. One is that they really push districts and communities to be thoughtful about what they're trying to accomplish in the building and what kind of a building they require in order to accomplish those goals before we get into the conversation of like, where does the building go? And is it 3 stories or 4 stories? So they really encourage a very methodical approach that goes from one step to the next. So we were invited to the program for that reason. The most exciting reason to be invited to the MSBA core program is that the state will share in the cost of the program with grant funding to Medford. Our reimbursement rate, we're not going to talk a lot about that, is over 50%. There's a lot of intricate details there that we will talk about in future meetings, but for tonight, just for you all to know, the big draw of being part of this program are those two things. One is the proven, tested approach that makes sure that education is better than we started with, and the substantial state grant that comes with participation in their program. So between 2023 and 2025, there was a whole bunch of work happening on our side, which I'll talk about in just a second. And then in 2025, what kicked off was really the feasibility study phase. So if you can go to the next slide, I'll move quickly. So in April of 2024, we started our eligibility period, and it was April 2023, we submitted a statement of interest. The board approved us in December of 2023. And then in May of 2024, we started what was called the eligibility period. And in this period, we had to do a whole number of things. We had to provide them an initial understanding of the space in the building. We had to also outline our overarching goals for education. And we had to partner with the MSBA to agree on the number of students that we were going to build a building to house. And that enrollment study was really informative, very detailed, and looked at everything from what is our historical enrollment over the last 10 or 15 years to what are we seeing in terms of trends in our enrollment, to how do we expect the population of our city to change in the coming years. And that's through looking at real data around permitted projects, planned projects, et cetera. And so through all of that, we provided all of that detail, and the initial enrollment number that came out of the assessment was 1,200, which is about what our student population is today. And then we worked together to understand like what was different and unique about Medford that made that sort of like program assessment need to shift a little bit. And we worked closely with the folks at City Hall and Planning and Development, and we ultimately agreed with the MSBA that we would be building a building for our 9 to 12 students set at a target enrollment of 1,395 students. So some room to grow there. And projection wise, we're not expected to hit that 1,395 for some time, but having the space and the agreement that Medford is a community that's growing is a really important sort of linchpin in how we plan to support our schools going forward. The other things that we agreed to during this process is the centralization of some of our pre-K services and some expansion of that programming. So if you have very young children, you know that our pre-K services are typically half-day programs, and our full-day programs do stop short of a full school day. The plan is that those services will ultimately come out of our elementary schools and come into a centralized place with expanded capacity for enrollment. The other things that we did talk about were continuing to house our municipal daycare, which we call Kids Corner, and making space for the Medford Family Network, which is just one of the gems of Medford for young families, and something that obviously the district supports continuing forward with. So all of the eligibility period work was it felt like a lot of paperwork. We had to talk about how we maintain our buildings and what our protocols are, and do this enrollment study. But the end result of the eligibility phase is an agreement that we will be building a building for 1,395 9 to 12 students. And that gave us the green light to move forward to Module 2 in the MSBA process, which allows us to sort of form the team. And I was very excited to get to Module 2 because it meant that we could start to solicit support from beyond our own administrative team in the schools and our building committee. And that's when we brought Left Field on in June 2025. And then our designer team, SMMA, joined us after a vote in October in November of 2025. So with all of that in place, lots of paperwork, many hours of work, we get to sort of turn our attention to the exciting stuff around the feasibility study. I'm going to turn it over to Matt to talk about that. The one thing I will say is what I was sad about when we got to the feasibility study was there was still more paperwork to do before we could get to the really exciting stuff. And I'm super excited that we're finally there and we're finally sort of moving out of the paperwork phase. So I'll let Matt talk gloriously about what's next.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. So we just wanted to start with kind of high-level schedule here, just so everybody can kind of understand the full process, and then I'll dive into a little bit of detail on the feasibility study and what we're actively working on. So you can see on the far left where we are today, just starting 2026, working our way through the feasibility study. The feasibility study has 2 phases in it and 2 submissions to the MSBA. One is called the Preliminary Design Program, or PDP, and the second one is called the Preferred Schematic Report, or PSR. And I'll get into a bit more detail on those on the next slide. But just to continue with the full schedule, once we submit those 2 options, those 2 submissions to the MSBA, we will know at that point in time what the school will generally look like, regarding whether it's an addition renovation or a completely new build. And that will allow us to proceed into schematic design. Schematic design is when we'll start to get into a bit more detail on this selected option. And it's when we'll start to, figure out large building systems, the real expensive stuff, so that we can start to formulate a project budget and understand what the cost of this is going to be. At the end of the schematic design phase, we do have another submission to the MSBA. This is really kind of the last major submission during this early phase, which will set, like I said, the square footage and size of the building, whether or not it's an addition renovation or a new build, and what the project scope and budget is. The MSBA, we're anticipating to submit that report to the MSBA in early 2027. I think February 2027 is our anticipated board of directors meetings with the MSBA after they review that schematic design submittal. If the MSBA approves it at the board of directors meeting in February of 2027, it will go to a town vote, which is when the community will vote to approve the funding for the project, so that we can proceed into the rest of the schedule. So you see that approvals phase in early 2027. And if it does get approved, then we'll proceed into the detailed design phase of the project. This is where we start to really get into, floor plans, very detailed information on, what materials we're using inside the building, outside the building, and we will really start to refine the overall design of the project. So there's roughly about a year worth of design development and construction documents to complete the full design of the project. We would anticipate probably starting some early site work while the building documents are being completed. So, we would anticipate starting some construction in 2028, mobilization to the site and like I said, some site work. The bulk of the construction will occur in 2029 and through 2030, with the anticipation of the school being completed for the opening day of school in September of 2030. So that's our overall kind of project timeline at the moment. But to touch base on where we are currently, so like I had mentioned, there's three major deliverables during this early phase, two in the feasibility study, and then the schematic design. So that first submission, again, is the preliminary design program, or PDP. This is a internal review by the MSBA. There is no formal board of directors approval required. The majority of the information that is being submitted at this stage in the project is a lot of information gathering and fact finding that we're doing throughout the school, not just on the inside, but we're also evaluating all of the conditions of the site, understanding traffic patterns, the size of the parcel, where wetlands are. We're really just trying to understand exactly what this site is and what this building looks like in its current state. We also touch on educational visioning to create an educational program or an ed plan. We'll touch base on this in a bit more detail, but essentially the educational program is really the cornerstone of the project. It dictates the overall square footage of the building, and it really highlights the delivery of education in Medford, both now and how it wants to be delivered in the future. The initial space summary, this is really a compilation of all of the spaces that we discuss with the administration to understand what is kind of their ideal idea for the school. And it just outlines all of the spaces that would be required for that project. The space summary is a document that is provided by the Massachusetts School Building Authority. It's a very prescribed document. The MSBA sets limits on certain room sizes, so it's a very large document that has a lot of information, and really at the end of the day will kind of drive the overall size of the project. And the other thing that we're working on right now currently is looking at alternative options. This is also a requirement of the MSBA. We need to study what it would cost, and if it is actually feasible to do just a code upgrade of the building, a renovation of the building, an addition renovation of the building, or a new building. So as we start to gather all this information from the existing conditions and the educational program, we will start to create a bunch of different options of all of those different construction types, and we'll slowly start to kind of figure out which one fits best, both from an educational standpoint and a cost standpoint. When we move into the next phase of the project, which is called the preferred schematic report, which is the second phase of the feasibility study, this is when we'll start to really dial in on what the option wants to be. We'll continue to look at all of the existing conditions and finalize, what all of those existing conditions are. We'll finalize that educational plan to really make sure that everything is being incorporated that Medford wants. And by the time we submit this preferred schematic report, we will tell the MSBA which option we think is the best moving forward. And that submission happens in June of 2026. So we're about 6 months out from figuring out what we think the best option is going to be. After that PSR submission, there will be a formal board of directors meeting to approve that. The MSBA will say, yes, we agree that this is the most educationally appropriate facility for the city. And then we'll proceed into schematic design. This is where everything in the first two phases are really cleaned up and really finalized, with the end goal of reaching an understanding of overall size of the facility. Like I said, if it's going to be an addition renovation or a complete new build, and then project budget, and we'll be getting detailed estimates from two different estimators at that point in time to understand what the cost is going to look like. With all of that information submitted to the MSBA, they will have another board of directors meeting in April of 2027. And this will essentially approve the scope and the budget, and allow the city to proceed to a vote to see if this project will move forward.
Thank you. So when we think about and when we talk about the need and the why associated with this project, it's fundamentally not a facilities or a space conversation. It's really about what kind of learning environment do our students deserve, should the community have, and what are the working conditions for our educators so that they can deliver high quality, equitable education. A lot of our conversations and our prep work to get to the places that we have already been and to the places that we want to get have really been aligned to answering those questions. We have had lots of conversations around what we want our students to be experiencing in school and how they are going to have that sense of belonging That is our collective charge this year and throughout. We believe that that is foundational for all learning across our schools and especially at our flagship. We want our students and our staff to be in spaces where they feel represented and valued and seen. And what that looks like for education today and beyond are flexible spaces. They are spaces that will provide opportunity for collaboration, for voice, for expression, and for representation. And so as part of this here, this list is parts of the conversation that we've been having with staff members, with our students, and with a collection of stakeholders. Further on in this presentation, you're going to get an overview of some of the work that we have done in our educational leadership forums and in our stakeholder sessions. Here, what a new Medford High School could have, as I've highlighted, are collaborative learning spaces for our students and our teachers, improved and enlarged CTE spaces and classroom spaces, universal accessibility and inclusion. That's not just about space and facility, not intentionally, but this building has outgrown what we want to provide our students for an education. It has outgrown what the current capacity should be. And so, intentional or not, sometimes this building itself is creating barriers for our students. So we need to be working on increasing our accessibility and our inclusion. Modern expansion of our auditorium, much larger seats, much more. Across Medford, our schools are used as community spaces. Especially here, our high school auditorium is used quite frequently for many different events, but to have not only a performance space worthy of our community programs and our school programs, but also for community gathering spaces for our principal and our school leadership to have spaces to gather students collectively is very important to us. As well as making sure our buildings are up to code, energy efficient, and safe and secure learning spaces for the community. And we have a wonderful resource here. We are connected to the Fells to be able to provide more opportunity and more enrichment and bring that into not only the learning experiences, but the community experiences is something that's very important to us here in Medford Public Schools. Right now, currently, the impact that our building is having on our educational delivery is seen in both a physical way and how we're able to use the building. So currently, physical condition, our roof is in poor condition. We have many mechanical, electrical, or plumbing issues. That mostly is seen sometimes in heating and water leaks, inconsistent heat, inconsistent cooling, wide variations depending on where you are in the building. IT issues, electrical, it's like I said before, the building is we're not able to use it in the manner that we need to be. We see that impact on our learning, and so the accessibility features, as I previously mentioned, hinder what we want to be able to provide as an experience for all of our students. Our building is large, but it is difficult to navigate. We see that in transitions throughout the building. We see that in the accessibility of the building. We see that also in the supervision and management of the building. And we see that in the layout of the building. So where classrooms are located and how they are situated in the building no longer necessarily aligns with our instructional vision and how we want to be able to provide education for our students. So as previously mentioned, one of the ways that we are studying the educational needs of the district is through a very important document called the Educational Plan. In a moment, Rosemary Park, who's one of the educational consultants for SMMA, will talk about the workshops and forums that we had with teachers and students and stakeholders. All of the work we've been doing is to inform this very important plan. This plan is going to help guide a lot of our decision making when we get to talking about space and design. So the educational plan is foundational in not only capturing what education looks like currently, but what we want it to look like in the future. And that's difficult sometimes when we're thinking about what it looks like now, what we think it will look like in 5 years, what it may look like in 10 years, and what it might look like in 20 years, which is why flexibility is really at the key here. The educational plan allows us to envision the learning spaces that we want to have, and it really needs to be a direct reflection of our core values and what our long-term vision is, and aligned to our instructional vision. SMMA, in order to help us build this plan, has been conducting, along with our partnership, comprehensive walkthroughs of both the existing Medford High School as well as other new build high schools throughout the Commonwealth. They've been meeting with students, with educators, with families, and with community partners, detailing program and department interviews. They'll be talking to you about that, and there was quite a few. And then the visioning sessions that they will be highlighting, where we really got into some conversations about what future models could look like. And I will tell you that those sessions were the most impactful for me thus far because of the student voice. It was extremely powerful, and that is the why for this whole entire project. Here you go, Rosemary.
Thank you. I'm Rosemary Park, and I'm an educational planner and architect with SMMA. I think that the superintendent gave a very great overview as to some of the work that we have been doing. We have really been hitting the ground running since we were awarded. And so just a little bit of background on the process of how we get to an educational space program, and what is the difference between this educational plan and this space program. There are a lot of these terms that are being used, and so we just want to give a little clarity surrounding this process. So if you look at the column on the left, we begin with the educational visioning process. And so as was mentioned, this was done with the educational leadership team, comprised of the district and Medford High School leadership, as well as teachers and school committee members. And then we also had an additional group of the educational forum, which included the educational leadership team, but also brought in students, parents, additional teachers, and community members. And these were led primarily by Mike Parolo, our educational planner, who couldn't be here this evening, but he held some incredible sessions. And we'll, in the coming slides, we'll talk a little bit more about the takeaways that came from these sessions. But in the sessions, we really did ask, how do we want to be teaching and learning in the future? And what does Medford High School want to be doing for the students, the staff, and the overall Medford community? And so all of this gets realized into the educational plan, which is defining the educational goals and overarching vision for Medford High School. And so from that, while the educational visioning was happening, concurrently we had, in the middle row you see here, we were conducting space programming meetings, and we had 49 just only educational space programming meetings, where we sat down with each current and future department or user group that would be in the reimagined Medford High School. And we listened. We listened so that we could really understand, what were going to be the types of spaces that they were going to need in order to support their vision, and in order to support the curriculum delivery goals. So from those meetings and from the educational plan, as well as taking a really intensive look at the curriculum and the master schedule, that helps to inform the educational program or the program space summary, as Matt mentioned earlier, which is this itemized list of every single occupied type of space. And it lists the quantities and the sizes, the net square footages of each of these spaces. And you can see that by the arrows that are pointing between the educational plan and educational program, that this is really a feedback loop. And so the educational plan guides and validates the program, but the space program can also help refine the educational plan. And so this is a really iterative process, which ultimately will get us to an overall building size or gross square footage. You might hear GSF or GFA in the future, and that is really referring to the overall building size. And so this overall building size is a direct result of the educational needs that are defined by Medford High School and the community. And so, as I mentioned, we had several events that comprised the educational visioning sessions, including the educational leadership team, and some of us on the design team, getting to be students for the day, where we shadowed Medford High School students so that we could really observe learning through their eyes, through the eyes of a student, where you can see the good, you can see the challenges, you could see the barriers, you could see the moments of engagement. And I mean, I know that every person who was involved in that just felt like it was one of the most eye-opening experiences. And so in addition to that, we also took the educational leadership team on several school tours. And we also had these 2 visioning sessions with the educational forum, where we discussed all of the goals and the vision for the high school. And these were pretty much all day long visioning sessions, in which we really took the time to get everyone's feedback, really dig in, understand everyone's hopes, dreams, concerns, fears. And I have to say that the community here is just so dedicated to really improving everyone's outcomes. So I felt really honored to be a part of all of that. We have a couple of slides just regarding the outcomes and takeaways of the visioning. And so we broke these down into sort of 2 categories of outcomes. So this slide centers on the goals on the Medford High School culture and the student experience of an MHS student. And so overwhelmingly, the educational forum agreed that providing a welcoming and inclusive environment for all was a key priority, and that really helped inform a lot of the other key takeaways from the visioning. So this meant recognizing that not every student thrives in the same kind of space. So the distribution of smaller and quieter support spaces just throughout the building for differentiated types of learning was desired. The group had also noted that movement, flexibility, and choice for students were necessary so that they could directly support the focus and wellness and the student agency that the team really wanted to provide for the students. And then also just providing the opportunities for frequent collaboration for both students and staff. whether intentionally planned or informal, so that we could really help foster the relationships and deepen the learning for everyone. And then in terms of teaching and learning takeaways, so there is a strong support for a comprehensive integrated school that brought together different pathways and identities while still also feeling like one unified MHS. The forum also favored collaborative learning communities over the long traditional corridors, some of which you have at Medford High School today. And so these would be spaces that really help encourage connection and visibility instead of just having, a straight long run with just solid walls on either side. There was a desire to integrate CTE with academics because this was seen as a way to be able to expand access to hands-on real-world learning for more or even all students because people really valued the types of experiences that the CTE students were getting. And then finally, the visioning workshop members believed that shared spaces would work best in a school if they were intentionally designed and then instructionally driven. So purposefully integrated within the space.
All right. Thank you, Rosemary. And hello, everyone. I'm just going to reintroduce myself. My name is Matt Rice. I'm an architect with SMMA, and I'm the principal in charge for SMMA as well. So as Rosemary and Dr. Galusi just went through, there's an incredible amount of work being done right now on the educational front to clarify the vision. But at the same time, we're also running a parallel set of activities that is really the fact-finding and the information gathering that Matt referred to earlier on. We're trying to get as detailed of an understanding of the existing building and the existing site as possible so that we can understand exactly what we're working with and understand how we might move forward from a physical facilities perspective. So in terms of those investigations, we're really tackling it from a whole variety of different perspectives, from both our own staff as well as consultants, specialty consultants that are looking at particular aspects of the building and the site. So to start off with, we are doing a detailed architectural and structural survey, which is visual observations by our technical staff within those two disciplines. And that's actually run parallel with detailed reviews from our mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection engineers as well, walking through the building. We're also having a consultant come in and review hazardous materials that are located within the building so that we have an accurate understanding of what might need to be removed in either a full demolition or a renovation scope. Hazardous materials need to be abated prior to either of those activities occurring. We have had a company come through and do a 3D scan of the existing building so that we know at a very fine grain level of detail where all the partitions, where all the elements of the structure are. So we understand really very granularly how the building is comprised. We are conducting a site survey as well. We have surveyors that have been out marking the perimeter, the property lines of the site itself, as well as topographical contours, the land as it moves across the site, utilities that are on the site, and really every aspect of the sort of physical topography itself, including site finished materials. Part of that actually is also identifying any wetlands that exist on the site and surrounding the site so that we can plan for any interactions from an environmental permitting standpoint there. We are doing geotechnical explorations, which is really trying to get a better understanding of what is the characteristics of the earth that we're building upon. So we do both borings. You can see some photographs of drill rigs there towards the top of the slide where they actually drill a hole down and take a core out to understand sort of at very deep depths sort of what the character of the soil or the rock is. And then we also do test pits with those excavators that you also see in the photo photographs to, at a shallower depth, understand sort of the characteristics of the soil. We, at the same time, are studying geo-environmental conditions. Where there might have been buried oil tanks on site, we understand where those were, how they were removed, and whether or not there's any residual materials that need to be addressed from a soils perspective. We are looking at the traffic flow in and out of the site, having a traffic consultant on site doing counts of vehicles that are moving, looking at both cars, buses, every type of vehicle that are coming in and out of the site. We do a test of the hydrant flow capacity on site to understand whether or not we need to supplement the fire protection system for the school moving forward. The existing school does not have a fire protection system in most of the building. There's a few later renovation areas that do have it, but primarily unprotected at the moment. So we need to know some specifics as we design the new system. And then lastly, we also take measurements for environmental noise on the site itself. So we have been installing microphones to understand what is the ambient noise level. So with that, when we build a new building, we're not increasing the ambient noise for the surrounding community beyond acceptable thresholds. So just some quick observations from all that investigation that we have been doing to date. Some of it has been completed at this point. Some of it is still ongoing, not quite as we speak, but certainly during the course of the day earlier today. So what we know, and these may be very apparent for those that are familiar with the high school building, but maybe for those of you that are not, there's some interesting points here. One, just the fact that the building itself, the high school, is not visible from Winthrop Street. And that has some challenges in terms of the building having an identity on the site and sort of an awareness of where the building is. In a similar fashion, there is only one point of entry from Winthrop Street and one exit as well, consequently. And so that limited access point into the site is something that is a challenge that we need to examine as we move forward. In terms of the actual site coverings, a little more than half of the site is actually paved currently. So impervious in terms of rainwater coming down. And it just is, there's a lot of pavement on site overall. In direct correlation to that is the fact that there's few shade trees around the entirety of the site itself. Certainly the fell surrounds the site and provides some perimeter cooling, but on the site itself, there's a very small quantity of trees. There's an incredible amount of vertical height change from Winthrop Street all the way to the top of the site at Edgerly Field. 80 feet of vertical grade change is several stories going up. If you've been on the high school site, you certainly have felt that walking up and walking through the building itself. There's no treatment of the stormwater on site. The accessible parking spaces that are on site have compliance issues in terms of overall. And even when you get out of an accessible parking space, usually the grade that you have to navigate to get into the building is not compliant. So there's issues there. Similarly, moving up to the building from Winthrop Street has some accessibility challenges. And once you actually get to the building doors themselves, there are many of them that have stairs limiting entry for the public. And then in terms of the building is 55 years old. And unlike a lot of buildings, the majority of it is the original footprint. There was not a lot of additions put onto the building, any additions put onto the building. And then the renovations that were done for the science lab, some of the CTE spaces, which were renovated by the CT programs themselves, the Medford community media space, the TV studio in there as well, with some of the later renovations. But by and large, the entirety of the building is that 55-year-old structure that was originally built. We talked about the challenges in terms of accessibility for students, as well as community that are visiting the building and taking advantage of the numerous community resources that are there. That roof that is in poor condition is due in a large part to significant areas of ponding on the roof. And ponding is when water is not able to drain off the roof. And so if you look at that upper right-hand photograph, you can see a large area where water is reflecting back at you. And those areas are both on sort of the most recently re-roofed section over the science lab, as well as the older section of roof. So there's roofing challenges across the entirety of the structure. The building systems, because the majority are original to the building, are all at their useful life expectancy. And so there's valiant efforts that are being made on a daily basis to really combat things that are falling into disrepair, needing repair, and really causing challenges in terms of areas of the building that have to be sectioned off from use, which causes disruptions to the education going on. I think that the uneven air temperatures from the mechanical system and the noise that are generated from those original units was mentioned earlier. And also the fact that the emergency generators within the building are not functional right now. So from a safety and resiliency standpoint, there's challenges to be had. I may have skipped over that other lead-in slide too quickly here, but I think we're just going to shift gears
Thanks, Matt.
into ways we can engage. Yep.
Sorry. I was looking at what slide I was supposed to take, and then I didn't look at the actual number of the slides. So sorry about that. So what we're going to wrap up with talking about some of the many ways that this is a project of many and already is. So, I mean, you're hearing from a handful of us tonight, but in some of the work that the team has been doing, Rosemary and her team, to understand how we do things at Medford High from an educational perspective, has held 49 programming meetings. You can see them all here. In each of these meetings, she was meeting with teachers, department heads, subject matter experts in these topics to understand what space they use, how they use it, what happens in the program. So a tremendous amount of data gathering. And I've been so impressed that you like literally can't stump Rosemary about how things happen in our programs right now. Like she's just like right there. She doesn't miss a beat when you say, how does this program do this thing? She knows. And that's part of the getting to know you phase that, you know, feels like paperwork, but is like super, super important because it's going to help her help us inform some of the work that we do. Matt, if you go to the next slide. The other thing that is actively happening is that we've formed 4 advisory teams, each with like a specific specialty, and we have populated those teams. There's some crossover with our building committee, but we have cast a wider net to the community to say, if you have a particular expertise about these particular topics, we would love to hear from you in a way that will not, you know, bury you in meetings and time commitment, but will be really impactful so that the architects can hear from a wider swath of Medford. So the sustainability and MEP systems has 16 folks on it, including folks from inside the school, as well as people in our community who are construction project managers and sustainability experts. We have folks from City Hall joining us. If you go to the right, I'm going to go like around a circle here. The site safety and security team includes Chief Buckley and Chief Evans. It includes Tim McGivern and a whole variety of people who are weighing in on things like traffic circulation and the safety of the site and what is possible on the site, and asking questions like, can there be more playing fields on the site, and what happens if you know, how do we make sure that the bus service is not hindered by the flow of traffic with students on foot or cars. So lots of sort of I'll call it like outside physical space kinds of questions and considerations happening on that team. So we have 18 folks with us on that team. Then we have an interior and exterior design team that is talking about the kinds of materials we're interested in using, and ultimately, what the inside and outside of the building looks like, what people's eye is wanting and expecting from this project. We have 18 folks there. And then we have our educational planning and equity team, largely made up of district staff with a handful of folks from the community and who work in similar capacities in other districts who live here. We have 23 team members there. So every time we put out a call to say we want people with particular expertise, I'm just like completely blown away by like how skilled and expert Medford really is. So we had no trouble appointing these folks. Each team has students on it as well. But we had no trouble appointing folks with really particular and direct expertise about the things that we were here to talk about. So it's always so like such a nice reminder of what Medford really is when we get a chance to do these things, because it's like, oh, wow, there are 15 people actually who have done this exact thing somewhere in Medford, and that they're willing to spend their time and expertise. We have folks from various boards and commissions serving on these advisory teams. Folks from city departments, and the list goes on. So that's one of the things that's already happening. You can actually watch those meetings. They are live. They are on our YouTube channel. And there's the first round of meetings was held right before the holidays. The second round of meetings will be held next week. So all of those are meetings that we are recording and making available. So if people want to hear what folks are saying, what we're thinking about, you're more than welcome to go out and take a peek through each of those meetings. They're each about an hour and a half a piece. So as we look forward and start to talk about casting like even a wider net, there's a number of ways that you can engage. We do have a project website. It's where all of our deliverables are, where you can find building committee agendas, among other things, project documents, an increasing list of FAQs, and all the information that you could need about like the facts and figures of this project as that evolves. This is the first community forum. We chose to do it in a webinar format to make sure that we're maximizing language access for folks who need translation. And we intend to continue to provide translation services for those residents who require it both virtually and in person. And we will have another community forum like this in March. I'll talk about in just a minute. The school building committees are open to the public, and we welcome your participation, and there will be increasing places for more than just approving invoices and taking in lots of information, but really having some dialogue about what things are going to move forward. And so all of that is coming up as well. And then as we like continue forward, you'll start to see our like extended team out and about in the community. They're really excited to hit the farmers market, which is being held at the beer hall right now in winter. So it is a nice warm spot. And then, different community events, different school events, really to bring this project to life out in the community, so that people who may not know about it get a chance to know about it. People who may not be able to come to meetings get a chance to know about what the plans are and where we're at any given time. So all of that is to come as we talk about opportunities in the future. Very specifically, in the next 2 months, there is a tremendous amount of activity happening. As Matt mentioned, by the end of February, we will be submitting our PDB. And in order to get there, a number of things need to happen. So I'm going to just sort of run through this in chronological order. I think that's the easiest way to do it. Next week on Wednesday at the MHS library is a building committee meeting. This will be everybody, including the building committees, sort of first look at some design concepts. And Matt can correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I'm envisioning this is like a big piece of paper that is like the property and like different circles or squares about like where the building could roughly be. So very rough cut, but an opportunity for us to provide some guidance to say, you've given us 20 options. We hate options 2 through 5. All the rest of them we want to know more about. And so that helps us start to like narrow that funnel so that those design alternatives can move through the process. On the 11th, there will be another building committee meeting. And in that building committee meeting, we'll be taking what we moved forward from that first look to starting to talk about in a very rough way, what kind of cost would we expect with those options, as well as starting to talk about some of the anchor options of a code renovation, and starting to talk about the nuances of like ad reno options, which are where we might preserve some things in the building and not others. So all of that will again continue unfolding on February 11th. There will certainly be more opportunity to collect your feedback and input at that time. And then on the 23rd, there is another building committee meeting, and that's where we will be like finalizing our submission. So that will sort of be the culmination of like that little track of work. On the 5th of March, there will be a community input session. And so what will happen there after we submit the sort of broader package of these are all the things that we're thinking about, these are all the designs that we're going to continue to study in the coming months, we will be like laying that sort of final package out for the community to do an input collection session. So that's where we'll be saying to you, tell us what you think about options A through G or options 1 through 10. And really specifically asking the community to like weigh in. What do you love? What do you hate? What do you wish? So that will be like I see that as like one of the most exciting sessions that we'll do, because we'll really be as a community thinking about how do we shape and narrow down our set of options. And then finally on the 23rd of March, we'll have our regular building committee meeting where we'll be like updating and continuing to like refine and get more finite and narrow about the things that we're pursuing. So that's the track for the building committee and some of the community forums. On the right side of the page, I want to make sure that I give service to the work that is being done with the educational plan. That is a deliverable that will also go in at the end of February. It is a deliverable that is really a district deliverable with the support of this team. And that is where we will be outlining how we intend to implement an educational program in said revised / new building. And the school committee has to review that and ultimately approve it before it can be submitted. So we will have our first review of that on the 26th at our regularly scheduled school committee meeting. And then on February 2nd, we will plan, it's our plan to ask for approval of that document. And that angles us all towards this submission that Matt was talking about at the end of February. What the MSBA is going to do with all of that is provide us feedback. They build buildings for a living, so they have lots of really helpful and constructive input to provide. But they also will use our educational plan to say, based on what we're intending to accomplish in the building, what is their recommendation in terms of which of these designs meet or don't meet, so that we can refine those options as we go. So there'll be a lot of input and feedback from MSBA in those coming months, and that will help us and the building committee and the school committee and the entire community sort of like get from 20 options to 15 options to 10 options to 5 options to 1 option, which is where we will like land at the end of June. And in all of these meetings, the public participation is welcome and encouraged. The rules of the school committee and the rules of the building committee are available online. But roughly speaking, we do ask that people limit their comments to 3 minutes if they want to speak live. We're also exploring some other ways to collect input in these sessions so that it doesn't simply have to be, I have to be in a place where I can come to a podium and say something in order to have my voice heard. So you'll see a lot of opportunity for surveys and engagement and that kind of thing as you go to these meetings. All of these meetings are recorded. They're all on our YouTube channel. You're welcome to join us at any of them in person or in Zoom. School committee meetings at City Hall, building committee meetings at the MHS Library. What's next? And we have been collecting a handful of questions and answers. I'm going to turn it over to Will to sort of moderate some questions and answers. There's a QR code on the screen. So this is like your first chance to tell us the things you've been dying to tell Matt about the things you hope and wish for this building. So these go directly to Matt's cell phone, and he will be, adjusting designs in live time. But really, this is a place for you to tell us, like, what are you looking for in this project, from the process, in the project, or in a building. So QR code there, please, by all means, fire away. We'd love to hear from you. And I'm going to turn it over to Will so he can moderate and field some of the Q&A that has been coming in.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenny. My name is Will Pipicelli. I'm the communications director for Medford Public Schools. And I've been keeping my eye out on the chat and trying to answer some of the simple ones, but then also leave some open for this Q&A period. So we have a question that says, will there be air conditioning? Can someone from the SMMA team just kind of talk about some of the givens that, regardless of what this building looks like, will be featured in this project?
Yeah, well, I can take that. So to answer the specific question, yes, there will be air conditioning in the building. There's actually a whole list of given items that we were reviewing with all the educators as Rosemary was going through the programming discussions, just to help everyone have a baseline level of comfort with what we're going to be envisioning. Proper daylighting for classrooms, proper AV technology within the learning environments. Furniture that is adaptive and responsive to the educational needs. I'm probably not remembering everyone off the top of my head. I don't know if Rosemary has others that she has sort of burned into her psyche from repeating them over.
Reliable Wi-Fi. That was a reliable Wi-Fi. Just better wayfinding overall, both within the building, outside of the building as well. Yeah, I mean, it was it was a pretty good list, but I mean, outlets, educators, we find that educators really don't ask for that much in the end. It's really just, we would like a good Wi-Fi and some outlets, and, not power cords everywhere, but yes, they'll get that. So if I could pull it up, I mean, I think we could post something about it. But yeah, most of the givens are just some basic, comfort things that should exist in any renovation or, new construction school.
The last one I'll
Awesome.
mention is toilet rooms also. That's the other one that jumped, which I don't know why I didn't remember that one just to start off with, because that's probably at the top of the list. But toilet rooms for staff and students within the building, as well as the public visiting the building, that are they're spaced closely enough, they're clean, and they're accessible. So that will be definitely part of the solution at the end of the day.
Awesome. Thank you. We got a question on the project timeline. So how does our project timeline kind of compare to other schools that are undergoing the MSBA process?
Very similar. And I did see that comment. And I can clarify on the schedule a little bit better. The 2.5-year construction timeline is probably a little short, but that's because we're going to be starting a little bit earlier. Like I said, we're gonna mobilize to site probably while we're still finishing the documents, get some site work going. So there's probably, a few months to 6 months before the actual building starts that we'll be out, on site preparing. And then when the building is completed in, the summer of 2030, in the anticipation of it opening for the start of that school year, we'll still likely be on site completing site work. The school will be operational, but we'll still be looking to finish up some site work. It's not uncommon for that to push into the following year, just from a weather standpoint. We can't do final landscaping during the winter. Yes, it is in line with other projects in the state, but that 2.5 year period that you mentioned is maybe a little short just because of the kind of nuances of how the construction will happen.
I'm going to
Awesome.
jump in and say that the building committee has taken the approach that we want to move as fast as it is responsible to move. And that's for a number of reasons. So one is every day that you wait is a day where the costs increase on the back end, right? So we're really sensitive to that. But the other is that we know that doing something here has to happen in order for education to continue to happen in this building as we go forward. And so our students that are in the building today deserve what we're going to be able to provide in a handful of years. So I look at that as a sense of urgency that our kids deserve for this project to magically be completed, and we can't do that. So what we can do is, and what we have done at every step of the way in eligibility and informing the project team, is move as fast as is reasonably responsible and as fast as we can through these processes so that we can get going. I also think on a site as complex as this, and in a space where how the new building comes to be could be any number of things. Like we might see some level of like if you've been watching the Arlington project, there was a real phased implementation where they were able to construct part of a building, they opened that part of the building, and then they moved on to the next. None of those phasing questions can be answered yet because we don't know what we're building, if we're building anything. But just know that as you look at that out timeline, there's so many variables that are going to go into the refinement of that timeline. But my commitment to you is we're going to move as fast as we can, so that kids can see the inside of something new sooner than later.
Thanks, Jenny. So we've gotten a few questions both tonight, and we got some earlier this afternoon about design elements, specifically the swimming pool. How do elements like the pool get decided on whether they're included in the space or whether they're not included in the space? That might not specifically have to do with educational and ed plan.
The pool is a very fluid component of the building that will be discussed a lot over the feasibility study period. It is a component of the building that is not reimbursable by the state. So that comes at a high cost for the taxpayers of Medford. So as we start to weigh these options and look at it, we'll both look at it from a cost standpoint, but as we look at feedback from the community and from the administration, that will also very much inform the decision as well. And it really will inevitably be the community's decision and the school building committee's decision, if that will be included, and it is a very big cost factor. So it is something that we're looking at very closely, but we know it is a hot ticket for the city of Medford, that we are looking at closely.
Community interest in our recreation spaces is very high, and the pool is not an exception to that. So we've already received a slew of input around the pool and the tremendous strength that it provides to the community and the asset that it is. So very much on our minds, trying to figure out like the best way forward. But you know, we're working at it. We're working at it. We're not allowed to say what will be because we don't know yet, but we hear you.
And then we have a question that I think Principal Cabral or maybe Mr. Fallon would be able to answer. So in terms of the student voice throughout some of the educational planning and the visioning, what was it like getting their voices from vocational students and non-vocational students, and kind of how those came together to help form some of the discussion that happened over the last few weeks?
I know I can speak. It was no surprise, but it was nice to hear the students really making the connection in their own learning to, related to the career tech programs that they were part of. And it was nice to have them part of the, as thought partners as to what a new space could look like and what the space they have now maybe lacks, or and then the benefits of the space they have now too. Like Suzanne said, it was very powerful to work with the students.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, we were really intentional of the students that we chose to be part of this from all different backgrounds, all different learning styles. And we were really intentional in making sure that we had 50% of the students CTE and then 50% that are part of the general education of Medford High School.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll answer a few more questions before we wrap up today. So I think obviously the big question, this won't be, we don't know the price yet for this project, but when will those discussions kind of take place, and how will that be communicated when that time comes?
So we will start to look at like very high level cost per square foot estimates in this phase of the project. So we'll start to get a sense of cost, starting in the next few weeks here, but we won't have a final budget set until the end of schematic design, which will be at the end of this year, really in early 2027. Is when we anticipate to know what the actual budget will be. That's what we'll submit to the MSBA. Once the MSBA approves it, that is what will be presented to the community for vote. So we'll have that final cost estimate in early 2027.
Well, can I just add to that? That we know, and you can read in the news what high schools are costing. I would encourage everyone not to get like ahead of the train, and let's work through this as the process is intended. And the reason that's important is because we do have a building that's very complicated, and we do have a building that has some places where there's space that we would not get in a new building, like the pool. And then we have other spaces, other things that are substantially undersized. And we're doing a lot here, including centralizing our pre-K services, which will create space in other buildings and prevent future building projects that have to happen in those schools when those space considerations come up. So there's a lot of moving parts going on. When we get to the topic of like, how much will it cost and who will pay, there's an important, the MSBA in their partnership with us will pay for a significant portion of the expense of this building. And then the community and the mayor's office, the city council, the school committee will be working together to say, now, how do we take what we know about what it will cost and what we know about how the MSBA will participate in this project? And then what is the rest of our revenue plan that gets us to paying this building? And it's my hope that working together, we will be able to identify a revenue plan that does do more than just pass all of this cost on to the taxpayer, but also really thinking through this as a very strategic effort where we are making an investment now that will save us from many, 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 many projects in the future. as we go down the road. So it's the question of how much it will cost is a really complicated process on the SMMA side and the left field side to come up with the actual how much will it cost. And then it's an equally complicated conversation for us to have as a community here in Medford to say, and how will we pay for our cost? Yes, there will be a debt exclusion in the spring of 2027 to greenlight this project forward. How big or how small that debt exclusion is, there's lots of things to do between now and then, working together to figure that out. So we know that. And if anybody knows any millionaires or billionaires, please send them my way. I will tell them a compelling story about why they should invest in Medford High, so that the taxpayers don't have to pay. So yeah, I just wanted to like highlight that all of the elected officials in the city are thinking about this and are on board with making this project happen. So it's a really like exciting, important time to be thoughtful and strategic and future looking.
We'll take two more questions so we can kind of wrap up around 8 o'clock. We have a question about how the building gets designed so that we don't both universally and inclusive design, so that we don't have to constantly think about retrofitting the building to make sure everyone feels included and is able to accessibly use the building.
So I can start off here. Rosemary, you can jump in if you want to add anything, but I think universal design is really at the core of our design principles in terms of thinking about the building. We want to really provide the city of Medford and the district a facility where everyone feels welcome. And that really starts with making sure that everyone can access the building and interact with the building in a whole myriad of ways. And that it really does take that universal design lens that is above and beyond just baseline accessibility, baseline code compliance. We want to think about how does everyone arrive at the building and not feel like they are being othered as they are walking up to the front door, as they are walking to their classroom or their shop space. It's a very holistic view that we'll be taking, and we really do take it at a very, very, very serious level in terms of making sure that we end up with a building that is welcoming to all.
Yeah, and I think, Matt, just some examples that we put in there, because we look at universal design as, again, as Matt saying, kind of like a baseline, that's just a given in everything that in every part of the design and our approach. But going beyond that and looking at the even just the color temperature of lighting and how how are we really accommodating different sensitivities, different, not just physical space and accessibility, but also just neurodiverse populations as well. And so it's something that we do take very seriously, and we continue to look at it from that lens throughout the design process.
And then our last question for tonight, as we think about some of the submissions that we're going to be giving the MSBA in the next couple of weeks, what kind of feedback does the MSBA give between the preliminary design and the final design?
A lot of what they'll review in this very first submission, the PDP submission, it revolves around the educational program. Again, that's like kind of the real key document that we're working on. They'll certainly, look at our space summary, which is just a breakout of all of the spaces in the building. They do have their own guidelines and processes and cost caps, so they'll make comments on what they consider to be an eligible or an ineligible space. So there will be a lot of kind of back and forth with the MSBA, kind of shifting things around and massaging the design. They don't get super detailed from like an actual design standpoint, and Matt Rice, you can chime in from a design standpoint, but in these early phases, that's really kind of the key focus to get get the project to a, 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 project to a, 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 project to a, 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 building that we want.
Yeah, I think you're correct, Matt. In terms of the actual design, the PDP submission is not heavy on design at all. There's high level alternatives that we're putting in to establish cost models, but those are not design specific at that point. That feedback and input will come later in the process as we get towards the end of the PSR phase, and certainly in schematic design. The commentary will be focused on the data and making sure that the space summary is in alignment with the educational plan, so that, as you said, that we can make sure that we're building what we have said that we want to build, or design what we and plan for what we want to plan for.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So I know we still have a few more questions out here. We'll take a look at these and make sure we get them on our website. If you'd like, you can also just throw them into the QR code. That would be super helpful. And if you leave your email in your question, and how we can make sure we get back to you, so we can inform everybody about the project as much as we can at this time. Does anybody have any last words from our panelist team before we wrap up tonight?
I'm just going to sneak in the answer to one more question, which is, are you reaching out to donors for something like the pool? If you know a donor, please send them my way. And yes, we will reach out. So a donor plan is definitely like in the offing. And if you know who those folks are, please give me their number and I'll make some phone calls. So yes, we will definitely be looking for donors. So and then the QR code we'll make sure is posted on our website as well. And you can take a look there. And then we'll be working to sort of like weave all of this continuing set of questions into the website, because the questions are going to continue to evolve. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for to the Left Field team and to SMMA, and for Dr. Galusi and her team, and to Will for being an extraordinary moderator of the many Q&As here. I'm excited about this project. I hope to see you, many of you, live in person on Wednesday. And my information, my personal or my school committee email is on the school committee website, and you are welcome to reach out anytime you want to talk. I could talk your ear off about all this all day long while these guys do the real work. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and we will see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.